Prayer and protection. When comforting others who are suffering, we should combine our concern with corporate prayer. Here's Gene.
Now here we're going to get a little taste of, in a generalized form, one of the first aspects of his suffering, and we find that in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 8. He says, "We don't want you to be unaware, brothers, of our affliction that took place in the province of Asia." Now, let me fill in the gap. If you go to the book of Acts, you know that he came to the city. He ministered. He was there for 3 years. He lectured every day for 2 years in the school of Tyrannus. People came from all over Asia, both Jews and Gentiles. This huge city, probably 500,000 people. The temple of Artemis was there. People would come to worship this pagan goddess, this fertility goddess. And there was all kinds of immorality and issues that were surrounding their worship. It was typically pagan. There was a lot of demonism in that city. In fact, he was so successful in his ministry in those 3 years. There were so many people that came to Christ out of paganism and out of demonism that one day they had a bonfire in the middle of the city, evidently. And they bought all of their books, their evil, demonic books that taught them sorcery and all those things, piled them in a pile and burned the books in a bonfire. Now, it wasn't just a little bonfire. We're told that the value of the books was 50,000 pieces of silver. And one time I did a little calculation on that using other inputs and figured that the value of that bonfire and those books was $5 million. At least $5 million. That was about 20 years ago. By today's economy, it could have been $6 million, $7 million. That was a huge bonfire. And that was huge in terms of cutting in to the idol business. This stirred up all kinds of animosity towards Paul. And it created a riot because there was a man who made silver shrines. He had a lot of people who worked for him. And he said, if we don't stop this guy, we're going to be out of business. We're going to lose money. People aren't buying these shrines anymore. And consequently, they did stir up this riot. And they took Paul, and the whole city was in an uproar. Fortunately, the disciples kept Paul from going into that arena. Otherwise, they'd probably killed him on the spot. And things got so intense with persecution that Paul had to leave Ephesus after 3 years of ministry. Now, this is the background, you see, that he's writing in about here. He says, "We don't want you to be unaware, brothers, of our affliction that took place in the province of Asia." Ephesus was the capital of Asia. "We were completely overwhelmed." And if you go to the book of Acts, there were 2 other men that were with him. Together, they were taken captive. He says, "We were completely overwhelmed, beyond our strength." We didn't have any strength left, that we even despaired of life. In other words, this was an incredible, painful situation. They were on the brink of death. They thought their heads were going to be severed from their bodies. And fortunately, God preserved them. God saved them out of that situation. And so as he writes here in verse 11, if you go to verse 11, he says, "And you can join in helping with prayer for us so that thanks may be given by many on our behalf for the gift that came to us through the prayers of many." What he is simply saying is that I pay tribute, Paul says, to your prayers. That you prayed for me, that people were praying for me, others were praying for us, and we were delivered from the situation because of corporate prayer. And that's why I word this principle this way. When comforting others who are suffering, we should combine our concerns with corporate prayer. You know, Jesus made a very interesting statement in Matthew 18:20. For where two or three are gathered together in my name, I am there among them. Is Jesus present when you're alone? Of course he is. Does God hear personal prayer? Of course he does. But there's something unique when believers join together in oneness of heart and mind and pray. And that's what Paul's talking about. And prayer, corporate prayer, becomes a very, very important part of dealing with suffering, dealing with pain. And so I have this question: in what ways have the prayers of fellow believers helped you to endure various kinds of afflictions and suffering? And I'm sure if I open this up to you tonight to share how corporate prayer has ministered to you, we could be here half the night in sharing what God has done in your life through prayer. I know how much it means to our good friends, Don and Mary Logue. And before we started our session, we prayed together for them. I know how much that meant to Don when people came to his hospital room and prayed for him. He mentioned that last night, how much that love, that indicates not just concern, but love when we pray for people. And I know you've experienced that. And let's remember, that's a very, very important principle that grows out of this particular passage.